And now, Johnny Harelow in Bunnytown, the Crimson Paw.
My name's Johnny Harelow, and I've learned one thing about Bunnytown. The docks don't sleep, but they sure know how to bleed. The city's got a pulse, and it's pounding hardest where the ships groan and the cranes creak. Tonight, that pulse was running red. I was in my office, third floor of a building that's seen better decades, sipping carrot whiskey that tasted more like regret than liquor. The rain was doing its best to wash Bunnytown clean, but some stains don't come out. My desk was a mess of unpaid bills and old case files when the door slammed open, letting in a gust of wet air and a very nervous otter. Otis Otter stood there, his slick fur dripping onto my floor, eyes wide enough to reflect the neon outside. "Harelow," he gasped, "you gotta help me. The docks, they're a slaughterhouse. 4 bodies this week, all marked with a bloody paw print. They're calling it the Crimson Paw." I leaned back, chair creaking like my patience. "Slow down, Otis. You're the union boss. Since when do you care about a few dead lowlifes?" Otis paced like a caged animal, his voice trembling. "Since it's killing my docks. Workers are too scared to show up. Shipments are late. Bosses are breathing down my neck. And I'm one missed quota from losing everything. Find this Crimson Paw, Johnny. Stop 'em before they stop us." I took a sip. Let the burn settle. Otis wasn't telling me everything. Guys like him never do. But the Crimson Paw, that name stirred something. A memory from 5 years back when I helped bring down Grim Fang's smuggling ring. A case that cost more than I like to admit, including a partner who didn't deserve what she got. "All right, Otis," I said, setting the glass down. "But if I'm diving into this, I need the truth. What are you not telling me?" His whiskers twitched. The last victim, Vinnie Vole, he wasn't just a loan shark. He was tied to the old smuggling days. You know the ones. My blood went cold. Yeah, I knew the ones. And suddenly, this case wasn't just about dead criminals. It was about ghosts I thought I'd bury it. I grabbed my fedora and headed for the door, the rain calling me to the docks. In Bunnytown, justice is a slippery thing, and vengeance, that's just justice with sharper claws. The docks at midnight were a symphony of rust and despair. Fog rolled off the harbor like the city's bad conscience, wrapping around the skeletal cranes and sagging warehouses that lined the waterfront. This was where Bunnytown's legitimate business ended and its shadier enterprises began. Warehouse 47 squatted like a tumor between 2 container yards, its corrugated walls streaked with decades of grime and decay. Chief Katzelwell waiting for me at the crime scene tape, his gray tabby fur darkened by the mist rolling in from the harbor. "Johnny," he said, extending a paw, "thanks for coming out in this weather." Chief Katzel had been running Bunnytown PD for 15 years, and in all that time, I'd never known him to be anything but straight. He was the kind of cop who still believed the badge meant something, even when the city tried its best to prove him wrong. "What have we got, Chief?" He pulled back the tarp covering the latest victim. Sal Ferret lay sprawled against the warehouse wall, his throat opened like a second mouth. But what caught my attention wasn't the wound. It was the crimson paw print painted on the wall above his head, still wet enough to gleam in the streetlight. "4th one this week," Katzel said grimly. "Same M.O. each time. Professional kill, then the calling card." I knelt beside the body, studying the scene. The blood spatter told a story of quick violence, but there was something deliberate about the positioning. "Any witnesses?" "None willing to talk. But Johnny," Katzel's voice dropped low, "I think this connects to the old Grim Fang case. All 4 victims were dock workers back then. All of them had connections to the smuggling operation. The Grim Fang case. 5 years ago, I'd been part of a joint task force that brought down the biggest smuggling ring in Bunnytown's history. Drugs, weapons, stolen goods. Grim Fang had his claws in everything. But the bust had gone sideways, and my partner, Detective Swan Swift, had taken the fall for information leaks that nearly got us all killed. "I think someone's cleaning house?" I asked. "We're getting revenge." Fawn Swift was officially drummed out of the force, but word is she never left the city. Could be she's settling old scores. I stood up, brushing rain off my coat. Fawn Swift. The name hit me like a punch to the gut every time I heard it. She'd been the best partner I ever had, and I'd done nothing to help her when internal affairs came calling. If she was alive, if she was behind these murders, I owed her a conversation at the very least. "Chief, I'm going to need full access to the Grim Fang files. Everything we've got." "Already pulled them," he said, handing me a thick manila folder. "Just be careful, Johnny. If Fawn's really behind this, she's not the same animal you used to know. 5 years of disgrace can change someone." As I walked away from the crime scene, the folder tucked under my coat, I couldn't shake the feeling that Chief Katzel was holding something back. Not corruption. I'd never known him to be anything but honest. But worry, maybe. The kind that comes from watching good cops go bad. The Grim Fang files made for ugly reading, even 5 years later. Page after page of documented corruption, violence, and betrayal that had eaten through Bunnytown's docks like cancer. But what struck me most was how clean the case looked on paper. Too clean, like someone had scrubbed out all the messy details that might have explained how everything went wrong. I was in my office, working through the files for the third time, when Deputy Chief Marcus Wolverton knocked on my door. He entered without waiting for permission, filling the door frame with his considerable bulk. Wolverton was everything Chief Katzel wasn't. Ambitious, political, and always looking for an angle. "Harelow," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk like he owned the place. "Heard you're looking into these dock murders?" Word travels fast. Word travels to the right ears. "I wanted to talk to you about Detective Swift." I leaned back, studying his face. Wolverton had been the lead investigator on Fawn's corruption case, the one who'd built the evidence that destroyed her career. "What about her?" "She's dangerous, Johnny. Always was. Too passionate, too willing to bend rules to get results. When she got caught taking money from Grim Fang, it wasn't a surprise to anyone who knew her. Except I knew her better than anyone, and it was a hell of a surprise to me." Wolverton's eyes hardened slightly. "Sometimes we don't know people as well as we think. Fawn Swift was dirty, and now she's a killer. If you're smart, you'll help us bring her in before she hurts more innocent animals." "Innocent? These weren't choir boys getting killed, Wolverton. They were all connected to the smuggling ring. Criminals or not, they didn't deserve to die, and if you're helping Swift evade justice, you're an accessory after the fact." I stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "Thanks for the legal advice. I'll keep it in mind." After he left, I sat staring at the files, pieces of a puzzle starting to form a picture I didn't like. Wolverton had been awfully quick to point fingers at Fawn, awfully eager to make sure I wasn't looking too closely at the old case. In my experience, when someone was that helpful, it usually meant they had something to hide. I picked up the phone and dialed Chief Katzel. "Chief, it's Johnny. I need to ask you something about the Grim Fang investigation. Off the record." "Shoot." "I need to know who had access to our operational plans, who knew where we'd be and when." There was a long pause before he answered. "The task force was small. You, Fawn, myself, and Deputy Chief Wolverton handled the coordination. Why?" "Just curious about information security. Thanks, Chief." I hung up the phone and stared out the window at the rain-soaked streets of Bunnytown. 4 animals with access to sensitive information. One was dead, one was disgraced, one was me, and one was now Deputy Chief of Police. If someone had been feeding information to Grim Fang, I was starting to get an idea who it might have been. 3 nights later, following a tip from Sly Weasel at the Rusty Anchor, I found myself in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the warehouse district. The entrance to the pit was hidden behind a stack of shipping containers, guarded by a fox wearing brass knuckles and an attitude problem. "You lost, Rabbit?" he asked, looking me up and down like I was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. I pulled out a roll of bills, thick enough to choke a horse. "Looking for action. Heard this was the place to find it." Money has a way of opening doors that were previously welded shut. The fox pocketed half my roll and jerked his head toward the tunnel. "Fight starts in 20 minutes. No weapons, no recording devices, and no questions about what you see down there." The tunnel system was a maze of concrete and rust, lit by strings of bare bulbs that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and something else, something that reminded me of the crime scenes. Fear, maybe, or fanaticism. The pit itself was exactly what you'd expect, a circular concrete depression surrounded by makeshift bleachers filled with Bunnytown's criminal element. But this wasn't just entertainment. The crowd had an energy to it, a focused intensity that went beyond bloodlust. These animals believed in something. In the center of the pit, 2 fighters were going at each other with the kind of violence that made professional boxing look like a tea party. A wolverine and a raccoon, both bleeding, both determined to be the last one standing. But what caught my attention wasn't the fight. It was the symbol painted on the pit's floor, a crimson paw print, identical to the ones left at the murder scenes. First time? I turned to find a badger standing beside me, all muscle and scars, with eyes that had seen too much violence and not enough justice. "Depends," I said. "What exactly am I watching?" "Justice," she replied simply. "Real justice. Not the kind that comes with lawyers and technicalities." She gestured toward the crowd. "Every animal here has been failed by the system, Rabbit. The Crimson Paw gives them something the courts never could, the knowledge that the guilty actually pay for their crimes. And if the Crimson Paw decides you're guilty, then you better hope you're not." The fight ended with the wolverine standing over the unconscious raccoon. The crowd cheered, but it wasn't the wild roar you'd expect from a typical fight crowd. It was controlled, purposeful. These animals weren't here for entertainment. They were here for validation. That's when I saw her. Standing in the elevated section reserved for VIPs was a figure in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat, face hidden in shadow. But there was something about the way she moved, the tilt of her head, that made my blood run cold. I knew that silhouette. The figure turned and looked directly at me, and even across the distance, even in the dim light, I could see the glint of recognition in her eyes. Then she was moving, disappearing through an exit I hadn't noticed before. I pushed through the crowd, trying to follow, but by the time I reached the tunnel entrance, she was gone. All that remained was a crimson paw print, still wet, painted on the wall. And beneath it, written in the same red substance, were 2 words. "Hello, Johnny." I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow looked like a potential threat, every sound like footsteps in the hallway. The Crimson Paw knew I was hunting them, and they'd made it personal. By morning, I'd made a decision. If I was going to catch this killer, I needed to stop reacting and start anticipating. That meant thinking like Fawn Swift, assuming it really was her behind the mask. Fawn had always been methodical, thorough. She'd research her targets, learn their routines, find their weaknesses. If she was planning another kill, she'd already be watching, learning patterns. I called Chief Katzel from a payphone downtown. "Chief, I need to talk to you, somewhere private." "Come to the station. We'll use my office." "No, somewhere else. I think we have a problem in the department." There was a long pause. "The Fish Market, Pier 23. 1 hour." The fish market had been closed for years, another casualty of Bunnytown's economic decline. But it was perfect for the kind of conversation that could end careers or lives. Chief Katzel was waiting for me among the abandoned stalls, his expression grim. "Talk to me, Johnny. What's got you spooked?" "Someone's been feeding information to the Crimson Paw. Someone who knows police procedures, who can stay one step ahead of our investigations." "You think we have a leak?" "I think we have a traitor. Chief, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. During the Grim Fang investigation, did you ever suspect that someone on the task force was dirty?" Katzel's ears flattened against his skull. "What are you getting at?" "The information leaks that destroyed Fawn's career. What if she wasn't the source? What if someone else was feeding intelligence to Grim Fang, and when things went bad, they needed a scapegoat?" "Johnny, that's a serious accusation." "I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions. Questions about Deputy Chief Wolverton." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Finally, Katzel spoke with a voice heavy with the weight of old suspicions. "I wondered," he said quietly. "Wolverton always seemed to know just a little too much about our operational plans, and he was awfully quick to build a case against Fawn when everything went sideways. But you never said anything." "I had no proof, just instincts, and instincts don't hold up in internal affairs hearings." He looked at me with tired eyes. "If you're right, if Wolverton was the real traitor, then we destroyed an innocent animal's career to protect a corrupt cop. And now that innocent animal is killing everyone connected to the case. Can you blame her?" I could hear the pain in his voice, the guilt of a good cop who'd watched injustice happen on his watch. Chief Katzel had always prided himself on running a clean department, and the possibility that he'd been harboring corruption all these years was eating him alive. "Chief, I think Fawn is going to come for Wolverton next, and when she does, I want to be there. To stop her? To get the truth. All of it." The next evening found me watching Deputy Chief Wolverton's house from the shadows across the street. It was a nice place in Bunnytown's East Side district, the kind of home that required more money than a deputy chief's salary could legally provide. Another piece of evidence if I needed it. Chief Katzel was positioned at the back of the house, ready to move if things went sideways. We'd agreed that Fawn deserved a chance to tell her story before we decided what to do about her. Wolverton arrived home at his usual time, 7:30 sharp. Through the windows, I could see him moving through his evening routine. Dinner, television, the comfortable habits of a man who thought his secrets were safe. She came at midnight. I saw her first as a shadow moving through the garden, fluid and purposeful. The long coat, the wide-brimmed hat, the Crimson Paw had come calling. I followed at a distance, watching as she picked the lock on Wolverton's back door with the skill of someone who'd learned from the best. Inside the house, lights flickered on as she made her way through the rooms. I found them in Wolverton's study, the deputy chief sitting behind his desk with his hands visible, Fawn standing across from him with a gun trained on his chest. Her hat was off now, revealing the face I'd known so well 5 years ago. Older, harder, marked by years of anger and betrayal, but unmistakably Fawn Swift. "Hello, Johnny," she said without taking her eyes off Wolverton. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Hello, Fawn. It's been a long time." 5 years. 5 years of watching criminals walk free while I lost everything. My badge, my pension, my reputation. She gestured with the gun toward Wolverton. "Tell him, Marcus. Tell him who really sold out the task force." Wolverton's face had gone pale beneath his fur. "Fawn, you're making a mistake. I know you're angry about what happened, but killing me won't change anything." "Won't it? You destroyed my life to cover up your crimes. You took money from Grim Fang, fed him information about our operations, and when it all went bad, you made me the scapegoat. I moved closer, keeping my own weapon ready, but not aimed. Is it true, Wolverton? She's insane, Johnny. She's been living underground for 5 years, planning revenge against innocent animals. Innocent? Fawn's voice was sharp with rage. You want to talk about innocent? Tell Johnny about the bank account in the Cayman Islands. Tell him about the payments from Grim Fang's organization. Tell him about the animals who died because you warned their targets about our raids. Fawn, I said carefully, put the gun down. Let's talk about this. We're past talking, Johnny. Marcus here has been very chatty about his crimes. He's admitted to everything. The bribes, the information leaks, the frame job that destroyed my career. Haven't you, Marcus? Wolverton's composure finally cracked. You're damn right I took them money. You think a deputy chief's salary covers a house like this? You think any of us get paid what we're worth for putting our lives on the line every day? So you sold out your fellow cops? I sold information to animals who were going to get it anyway. At least I got paid for it. And when Fawn got too close to the truth, she was going to destroy everything. The task force, the investigation, careers of good animals who were just trying to make a living. I looked at Fawn, saw the vindication in her eyes. You got what you came for. Confession on record. We can take him in now. Do this right. Do this right? Like the system did right by me? Like it did right by all the animals who died because of his betrayal? She was right, and we both knew it. The system had failed her, completely, and now she was taking justice into her own hands. Part of me understood it. Part of me even approved. But I was still a cop, even without a badge. Fawn, if you kill him, you're no better than he is. Maybe so. But at least I'll be able to sleep at night. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Fawn with her gun trained on Wolverton, me trying to find words that would make a difference, and Wolverton sweating like a guilty animal finally facing judgment. You know what the funny thing is? Fawn said, her voice eerily calm. I used to believe in the system. I thought if you just worked hard enough, stayed honest, followed the rules, justice would prevail. You taught me how naive that was, Marcus. Fawn, please, Wolverton begged. I have a family, kids who need me. Vinnie Vole had family too. So did the others you helped kill with your information leaks. Her finger tightened on the trigger. How many animals died because you warned Grim Fang about our raids? I don't know. I didn't think about that. No, you just thought about the money. That's when Chief Katzel appeared in the doorway, moving quietly, but not trying to hide his presence. Fawn spun toward him, gun still ready. Easy, detective, he used her old rank deliberately. I just want to talk. Chief Katzel, I wondered if you'd show up. Fawn, I owe you an apology. We all do. You were a good cop, and we let you take the fall for this animal's crimes. Apologies don't give me back 5 years of my life. No, they don't, but maybe we can give you something else. Justice. Real justice. The kind that comes with handcuffs and prison sentences instead of bullets. You think he'll go to prison? You think the system that protected him for 5 years will suddenly start working? Chief Katzel pulled out a digital recorder. Everything he said tonight is on tape. Confession to accepting bribes, conspiracy, accessory to murder. The FBI's been investigating police corruption in Bunnytown for months. This is exactly what they need. I saw something flicker in Fawn's eyes. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. What about the animals I killed? Vinnie Vole and the others? Self-defense, I said. You were working undercover to expose corruption. When they realized what you were doing, they tried to kill you. You defended yourself. It was a stretch, but not an impossible one. With the right prosecutor, the right jury, it might even work. And if it doesn't work, if I end up in prison while he walks free, then you'll know you tried to do it right, Chief Katzel said. You'll know you gave the system one more chance to prove it can work." Fawn stood there for a long moment, guns still trained on Wolverton, weighing her options: justice versus vengeance, the system versus the street, the cop she used to be versus the killer she'd become. Finally, slowly, she lowered the weapon. "All right," she said. "We'll try it your way. But if he walks, if this gets swept under the rug like everything else, I'm coming back to finish what I started." "Fair enough," Chief Katzel said. "Johnny, would you do the honors?" I pulled out my cuffs and moved toward Wolverton. "Johnny Wolverton, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and accessory to murder." As I read him his rights, I could see the fear in his eyes, not just fear of prison, but fear of what would happen when word got out that he'd been dirty. Corrupt cops didn't do well behind bars, especially when their corruption had gotten other animals killed. "Johnny," he said as I led him toward the door, "this won't stick. I've got connections, lawyers, friends in high places." "Maybe, but your friends in high places just heard you confess to felonies. Might want to start making new friends." The trial of Deputy Chief Marcus Wolverton was the biggest news in Bunnytown since the original Grim Fang case. The newspapers called it everything from the trial of the century to corruption exposed. But for me, it was just the end of a long, ugly chapter in the city's history. Fawn testified for 3 days, laying out the evidence of Wolverton's corruption with the methodical precision of the good cop she'd always been. Bank records, recorded conversations, documented patterns of information leaks. By the time she was finished, even Wolverton's high-priced lawyers looked like they wanted to change sides. I testified about the investigation, about the murders that had led us to the truth, about the system failures that had allowed corruption to flourish. Chief Katzel testified about the internal investigation he'd been quietly conducting, about his suspicions and his regrets. Wolverton himself never took the stand. His lawyers advised against it, probably because they knew he'd only dig himself in deeper. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Wolverton was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, with the possibility of additional charges pending further investigation into his crimes. As he was led away, Wolverton looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You know this doesn't end anything, don't you, Johnny? There are others. There always are." "Maybe, but it's a start." Fawn's charges were dropped in exchange for her cooperation in the investigation. The FBI offered her a position with their anti-corruption task force, but she turned it down. "Too many years underground," she said. "Too much damage to repair." Instead, she took a job with a private security firm, protecting witnesses and investigating corporate fraud. Not quite law enforcement, but close enough to satisfy her need for justice. "What about you?" she asked me as we stood outside the courthouse after the sentencing. "Back to finding lost pets and cheating spouses?" "Someone's got to do it. And after all this, a little honest work sounds pretty good." "You know, Johnny, there's always room for a good investigator in corporate security. Better pay, better hours, and most of the criminals wear suits instead of masks." I considered it. The offer was tempting, and Fawn was right about the benefits. But Bunnytown was my city, with all its flaws and corruption and occasional moments of redemption. It needed someone willing to walk the dark streets and ask the hard questions. "Thanks, but I think I'll stay where I am. Someone's got to keep an eye on this place." She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in 5 years. Same old Johnny, still trying to save the world one case at a time. Someone's got to try. 6 months later, I was back in my office, working on a case involving a missing inheritance and a family of ferrets who couldn't agree on who deserved what. It was the kind of simple, honest work that paid the bills and let me sleep at night without wondering who was planning to kill whom. Chief Katzel had implemented new protocols for information security and internal oversight. The department was cleaner than it had been in years, though there was still problems. There always would be. Corruption was like mold. You could scrub it away, but if you didn't address the underlying conditions, it would just grow back. The Crimson Paw murders had become case studies in police academies across the country. How corruption could flourish undetected. How good cops could be destroyed by lies. How vigilante justice, however justified, was still justice denied. Fawn sent me a postcard from Miami where she was investigating insurance fraud for her new firm. Sunshine and honest criminals, she wrote. Not a bad combination. The PIP had been shut down, its followers scattered back to their regular lives. Some had found more constructive outlets for their desire for justice, volunteering with victim advocacy groups, supporting police reform initiatives, working to make the system more responsive to regular animals' needs. Others had simply found new places to vent their frustrations. I was thinking about all this when the door to my office opened and a well-dressed rabbit in an expensive suit walked in. He had the kind of nervous energy that meant money, and the kind of worried expression that meant trouble. "Mr. Harelow, my name is Harrison Cottontail. I need your help. It's about my daughter. She's missing, and I think someone's taken her." I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Rich rabbit, missing daughter, worried father. It could be a simple kidnapping, or it could be something more complicated. In Bunnytown, it was usually something more complicated. "Take a seat, Mr. Cottontail. Tell me about your daughter." As he began his story, I felt the familiar stirring of curiosity that meant a new case was beginning. Outside my window, the city of Bunnytown hummed with its usual mixture of hope and corruption, justice and vengeance, good animals trying to make honest livings, and bad animals trying to make easy ones. My name's Johnny Harelow, and this is my city. It's not perfect, and neither am I. But sometimes, if you're willing to walk the dark streets and ask the hard questions, you can make a difference. Sometimes, that's enough.
Join us next time for another thrilling adventure of Johnny Harelow in Bunnytown.